It was only a matter of time before Keir Starmer found himself in the unenviable position of telling Vladimir Putin to stop playing games. In a world where diplomacy is as much about performance as it is about action, our Prime Minister has now taken centre stage, urging the Russian President to sooner or later come to the table and negotiate a proper peace deal with Ukraine. And Starmer's words, delivered at a virtual meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, set a clear ultimatum. Enough of the stalling. The world will not wait for Russia to conduct a painstaking study before ending its brutal war. And addressing 25 world leaders, including Emmanuel Macron, the NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, and, of course, President Zelensky, Starmer struck a firm and pragmatic note. He painted Ukraine as the party of peace, willing to commit to a 30-day unconditional ceasefire, while Putin, true to form, remains the roadblock, the party of war. And the strategy, Starmer argued, must be threefold: strengthen Ukraine militarily, prepare to defend any ceasefire agreement through a coalition-led peacekeeping force, and most importantly, keep the pressure on Putin until he has no choice but to negotiate. And while this rhetoric was strong, there was an unavoidable reality. A ceasefire is only as meaningful as the conditions that sustain it. And Putin's historical playbook is one of delay, deception, and disruption. And if past negotiations have shown us anything, it's that the Russian leader is highly skilled at using diplomacy as a smokescreen for military manoeuvring. And of course, he's hiding behind one of the greatest statesmen of this century and probably last century, Sergei Lavrov. Zelensky himself has warned that Moscow is already massing troops along Ukraine's eastern border, indicating that rather than preparing for peace, the Kremlin is preparing for escalation. And the great difficulty lies in the mechanics of an actual ceasefire. Putin's demands include a permanent Ukrainian renunciation of NATO membership and ceding occupied territories, a red line for Kyiv and its allies. And the West, led by Starmer and Macron, insists on a ceasefire without conditions. But history tells us that ceasefires often favour the side with more leverage. If Ukraine pauses its operations while Russia continues consolidating its positions and taking advantage of the stupidity of the intelligence pause delivered by Trump, would that not simply reward the aggressor? This is precisely why Starmer's emphasis on a coalition of the willing matters. Peacekeeping forces, he suggests, should be poised to step in should a deal materialise. However, securing international buy-in remains tricky. Italy, for instance, has already distanced itself from any military presence in Ukraine, and without a strong US backing, particularly given Trump's erratic handling of foreign policy, the effectiveness of such a force remains uncertain. Starmer's press conference following the summit was notable for its directness. He condemned Russia's barbaric attacks, accused Putin of trying to delay and distract, and made it clear that Britain wouldn't simply wait for the Kremlin to act. The world needs action, not empty words, he declared, yet the broader political landscape complicates matters. The Biden administration's position on long-term support for Ukraine is contingent on congressional approval, and the US elections cycle looms large. Donald Trump, in characteristic fashion, has claimed that he's getting good vibes from Putin about peace while simultaneously parroting Kremlin talking points about Ukraine's battlefield position. With Putin and Trump engaging in a global game of chess, therefore, the onus falls on European leaders like Starmer to hold the line and be the adults in the room. Britain's commitment to military aid, intelligence sharing and economic sanctions remain steadfast, but can these measures alone force Putin's hand? I'm not convinced they can. Keir Starmer's intervention marks a significant step in Britain's evolving role in the Ukraine crisis. His insistence that Putin will sooner or later have to negotiate is both a statement of resolve and a warning. But history suggests that Moscow thrives on delay, urging any ceasefire as an opportunity to regroup and rearm. The question is not whether Putin will eventually talk. He will, but whether the West will be prepared to make that conversation count. The world is indeed watching. And as Starmer rightly noted, now is the time for action, and not just for words. But with Russian troops massing, Ukraine holding the line, and the global players like Trump throwing unpredictability into the mix, the only certainty in this conflict is that it is far from over.